I am Dharti Ma, Mother Earth, and I have been a witness to the great war of Mahabharata. What was the purpose of this war? Was it to establish Dharma? Or was it simply the Pandavs' revenge for the public insult and humiliation of Draupadi? To answer this, let me invite Draupadi here today to learn about her life karmas and the decisions she's made in her life. Namaskaram, Draupadi. Let me first welcome you here. Draupadi, Princess of Panchal, a Yagnaseni born from the fire. You were always known for your compassion and strong will.
Namaskar, Dharti Ma. I am Draupadi, the daughter of Maharaj Draupadi and the wife of the 5 Pandavas. I have suffered all my life but always followed my dharma. And I motivated the Pandavas into destroying the unrighteous adharmis for my humiliation and agony.
That is why we are here today. We are here to discuss how you followed Dharma and the decisions you've made in your life.
What would you like to ask me?
Is it true that your father did not want you before you were even born from the fire?
Yes, this is true. He just wanted his son to kill Dronacharya, but he was forced to take me because I was a blessing from the Devas.
Once he realized that he had to accept you, he was unhappy with the Devas and asked to have a daughter who would suffer all her life but still had the courage to face it, was pure and would remain pure even with all impurities thrown at her, would remain strong through all the hardships and still provide strength to others.
And I also never experienced childhood. When I came out of the fire, I was born as a full-grown woman.
That's very interesting. Since you were born a full-grown woman, that's probably why the first event of your life was the Swayamvar. It is believed that your Swayamvar was a very well-planned scheme. Although you liked Karna, you still stopped him from shooting the arrow.
Except for Karna and Arjun, no one could even pick up the bow, let alone shoot it. But like I said, I didn't even let Karna try, even though he had the full capability of doing it.
Arjun was there, but he was dressed like a Brahmin, not a prince, right?
Yes, he was dressed as a Brahmin at the time. And since all the princes and kings had failed, Krishna suggested that the Brahmin should try as well. Also, at the time, no one knew that Arjun was the Brahmin except for Krishna.
When Arjun brought you home and said he had skillfully won a prize, how did Kunti react?
Mata Kunti said, "Whatever you've won, share it amongst all 5 of you."
They all must have been confused because they were bound by Dharma to keep their mother's word. How did that make you feel?
I was confused because I didn't know how they were going to split me between them, until I realized that in order to fulfill Mata Kunti's orders, I had to marry all 5 of them. But how could I? It wasn't Dharma.
What happened next? Did you have any other options?
Yudhishthir said that the only other option was to marry Arjun and for the other 4 to take sannyas. But this had even bigger consequences. It also would break Mata Kunti's heart.
Is that why you decided to marry all 5 Pandavas?
I had to make an important decision. Vedvyas visited the Pandavas at the time and made them aware of the political implications of all 4 Pandavas taking sannyas. He said that Duryodhana would automatically become king once Yudhishthir, Bhim, Nakul, and Sahadev take sannyas. Though it was not dharma to marry 5 men, I agreed to marry all the 5 Pandavas to uphold my greater dharma to the people of Hastinapur.
Mata Kunti's orders may have been said in absent-mindedness, but its relevance was profound. You being married to all 5 Pandavas ensured that you all remained one close-knit entity. That is also probably why you were accorded the highest status among all other wives. But this by no means was any ordinary situation. You were a victim of circumstances and had no control over the situation. You were expected to love all your husbands equally, which indeed is a difficult thing to do. How did you manage?
My married life needed a lot of self-control. I spent a year with each of my husbands in turn. All my emotions required a great deal of adjustment when I changed my lifestyle for each of my husbands accordingly.
It is not too difficult to realize the tremendous responsibility that you had to bear as a wife of the 5 Pandavas, who led a difficult life. Despite the difficulties, you emerged as one of the most respected women in the history of Bharat. After marrying Pandavas, you eventually settled in Indraprastha. When Pandavas performed Rajasuya Yagya and then invited Duryodhana and others, is it true that when Duryodhana took a pond for a polished floor and fell into the water, you laughed at him and humiliated him? Wasn't this incident the real reason for the war?
Yes, I did laugh at him, but that was not the reason for the war. We all know how many times Duryodhana tried to kill the Pandavas. Duryodhana was evil. He wasn't even willing to give the Pandavas 5 villages after deceitfully taking Indraprastha from them in a game of dice.
Yudhishthir lost everything in the game of dice, including his chariots, horses, and elephants. And eventually, he lost his kingdom, Indraprastha. Then he lost himself and his 4 brothers only to become slaves. Finally, he gambled you and lost you too.
Yes, I ask you, was it dharma for Yudhishthir to put me at stake and indulge in gambling when he had already lost himself? Was it dharma for Duryodhana to order Dushasan to drag me by the hair to the royal court before the great assembly of people and try to disrobe me completely? Was it dharma for Karan to call me a public woman? I cried for help, but everyone was silent, including all the elders. Even my husband just sat there with their heads down.
What happened in that courtroom was adharma. Everyone, including Pandavas in that courtroom, was equally responsible for the crime. Your anger awakened the Pandavas to fight against injustice in order to restore dharma. Aren't Yudhishthir and other Pandavas also responsible for what happened? Then why did you only curse Duryodhana of death with a broken thigh and took a vow not to oil or tie your hair until you could wash your hair with the blood of Dushasan? Isn't your vow the only reason for the war?
It was inevitable. I called upon violence not as means of revenge, but to restore dharma. I motivated my husbands for the war during the 13 years we spent in the jungle. As Kshatris, their dharma was to fight adharmis. The Pandavas and Mata Kunti never did anything to protest against injustice. Someone had to. Let history judge if the war was important to establish dharma.
Dharma was restored at a very big price. Isn't it true that your Sakha Krishna told you that except your husbands, everyone in the war was going to die, including your children? Why pay such a price?
Yes, I thought about it, but I had to make a choice between accepting adharma to save my family or sacrifice my family for the greater good of the world. I made my choice, and I know that the war consumed the whole Kuru clan, but without the war, the adharmis would have won, and that was not acceptable to me.
Rani Draupadi, you will be an example for the generations to come. Born from the same fire that represents Kali's clarity of vision. Your fight against injustice was not just a protest, but also a movement in resurrecting the fallen grace and spirits of your men, whose consciousness had died when they lost you in the game of dice. You were the calm Lakshmi to the house, fulfilling your responsibilities, confined to the chambers of the house, until you were dragged into the courthouse to be insulted and disrobed. This changed your identity from the calm Lakshmi to the fierce Kali. You were as pure as the fire you were born out of, to destroy all impurities, dispel all darkness that consumed the whole Kuru clan. Your thinking, your deeds, your aspirations will inspire people for centuries, and your name will never be forgotten. Yada yada dharmasya glanirabhavati bharata
अभ्युत्थानम् अधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम् परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृताम् धर्मसंस्थापनार्थाय सम्भा